Hey, everybody. Hey, welcome. It's awesome to see you. It is so great to see you. I'm so excited to be here with another episode of, well, this is technically Manny Monday, but I'm calling it now Special Reports. Basically, I'm having fun with naming stuff, guys. You just gotta go with me at this point. So great to see everybody here. We got quite a few people watching. Listen, I appreciate everybody in the chat. Hopefully, we'll all have a great time today. I don't want to sit here and name everybody individually, but we just don't have time for that. We got a lot to get to tonight. But you all know that I appreciate you so much. Would not be doing this without the amazing support that I get from all you guys out there. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So just real quick, we got Tracy Parker in the chat. That's one person I actually wanted to speak to directly. So of course, Tracy Parker is, as most of you know, is Tracy Dupay, the daughter of Andrew Dupay, the mailman from The Ultimate Evil, who unfortunately committed suicide. Was he murdered? Right? There's a whole controversy there. Tracy, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be putting up our episode that we did very soon, within the next day or two. So that's going back up, guys. And other than that, hey, everyone, great to see you. So listen, we got a lot to get through today. So what are we talking about today? Well, we are talking about the Neto contradictions. Yes, the Neto contradictions. Contradictions. Wait a second, Manny. I thought that you were so confident in your Neto findings last year. Well, no. Not really. Any researcher worth their salt is not going to be like, yeah, this is the end all be all. We make hypotheses based on the information that we get at the time. So incredibly interestingly, and we will get into that in more detail, some contradictions have come up in the Neto story in these Queens DA reports. And I, for one, am so excited and happy. Why? Because as a researcher, I consider myself an honest researcher with integrity. I know there's some people who don't agree with me on that, and that's fine. But any researcher who gets contradictions that come up in their research and their story, and I know that everybody out there knows this. I mean, we're all reading the same documents, and I know that some people think I have egg on my face, and that's great too. I'm happy. Anybody who is trying to be up here and talk to you and analyze stuff, if they're not willing to confront their own biases, contradictions, and issues with their story, well, they're not worth your time watching. So as soon as I recognize these contradictions between the police report and what the Neto family told me directly on video, which we will see today, of course, well, I knew I had to put together a show, but it couldn't just be any show. It had to be the most thorough possible show in existence relating to the Neto story and Son of Sam. And of course, the reason why this is so important for me personally is because I am basing my new origin thesis, well, of Son of Sam on the Neto story and on the Neto story that was given to me. Remember, I'm just a reporter. I'm not making up these stories. I'm going out and people are talking to me, and then I'm showing you guys what they said. So the Neto story is not my story. The Neto story is the Neto story. And then, of course, we have these contradictions. So a challenge to my origin thesis has come up. And so I want to deal with that in an honest and mature way. And I want to do it in public with you guys. So listen, today is going to be mainly a solo show. There is a call-in link in the description, but I don't want you to do it yet. I want to get into my presentation for a little while. And then maybe towards the end, once I've laid out my thesis, once I've laid out my presentation, we can have a more fruitful discussion between us. So essentially, I've created, as I like to do, a little PowerPoint presentation that we're going to go through. And then I've created a little bit more than half-hour video that I am going to play with quite a bit of the old footage from the Neto interviews. And I'm going to stop and we're going to comment, and we're basically going to have a great time with this. I am so much looking forward to this. I love being challenged. I love it when people actually engage on the issues, not whether I'm wearing a wig, not whether my dad's a process member, not whether my mom's a secret communist working with Maria Neto to buy property from some communist front group, right? I love actual reality. Okay. And this is real. So without further ado, let's get into the Neto contradictions. So, of course, my hypothesis on the origin of Son of Sam, I think it behooves us to, well, put that out there, because this is something I've been working on, well, ever since I discovered the Neto story in 2021. And it totally blew my mind what the family was telling me. And it made me completely rethink Son of Sam. And of course, many of my hypotheses have borne out, and we'll deal with that in the show today. Communists for Latin America. So yeah, there's a trope going around that the Netos are communists. The Netos are the most God-fearing, salt of the earth, church-going, bringing in homeless children from the street, nicest, most capitalistic family you could ever imagine. So anyway, my hypothesis on the origin of Son of Sam. Okay, and it relies on the story that the Netos told me. Okay, and we'll get into the story that the Netos told me. Let's just deal with what I think is the origin of Son of Sam. So I believe Son of Sam spanned 3 years, not 76 and 77. I believe Son of Sam started in July of 1974. Okay, and it lasted until August of 1977. I believe that we have to rethink in our framework of Son of Sam to not just include the shootings, but to include the Wicker Street crimes, the crimes against the Neto family, the crimes against the Carr family, the crimes against Craig Glassman, all of which were extremely violent, could have had deadly consequences, just like, well, think about it, Son of Sam. He didn't kill everybody. So you can say the same thing, technically, that it could have had deadly consequences, right? Each shooting, because he didn't kill everybody. So that's why that makes sense logically. So in other words, the level of violence was just about the same. Throwing Molotov cocktails into open windows. Luckily that there was a screen there. Okay. But we're talking about extreme violence. Son of Sam started in 1974. I believe that Berkowitz was known to roam. And this is bearing out, by the way, very, very perfectly. I came up with this while talking to Jim Fay last year when he told me the story about how they chased Berkowitz around all night, driving around all night after an arson fire. And it made me realize, hey, here's a guy, Berkowitz, who loves roaming around. He just loves driving around. Well, as we're learning from these psychiatrist letters, and remember, Eric and I are starting a new series on Sunday called Psychology Sunday. As we're learning from these psychology letters, he was riding his bike all the way up to almost northern Westchester from the Bronx, starting at the age of 13. He talked about them every weekend, taking his bike up all the way from the South Bronx to northern Westchester, sometimes 50 miles. He later talks in his psychiatry notes about driving around all night, known to roam. I believe on one of these roaming operations that he found and discovered Wicker Street. And I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. Some of you might have already discovered a very interesting aspect of David Berkowitz's family life. But I believe he had every reason to be in the North Broadway, Pine Street, Wicker Street area of Yonkers in the years of 1974 to 1976, before he actually moved there, and having nothing whatsoever to do with a cult. And that's coming. Some of you may already know this if you've done your research and you're reading these letters. I'm telling you, the gold is in the psychiatry letters. You shouldn't even be looking at anything else, in my opinion. All that you seek is in those letters. I believe he fixated on this street due to the name and found the residence in the phone book. I believe that he if you read his letters, again, he was steeped in occultic literature, not deep, heavy thinking stuff. Give me a second. But popular occultic literature of the day. He was talking about Rosemary's Baby, and here, I have it in front of me. Hold on, right here. He was talking about Rosemary's Baby and Billy Graham's Angel, The Exorcist. So who's to say he didn't hear of the Wicker Man movie? Okay. Now it's not listed in that little thing there, but who's to say? It was a very popular movie. Who's to say he didn't know that? Okay. And as far as finding residence in the phone book, this is another thing that I'm finding in the psychiatrist letters, which is amazing. He writes extensively in his psychiatrist notes about finding people in phone books and cross-referencing this year phone book to that year phone book. This dude loved phone books. Berkowitz was obsessed with phone books. Okay. So I believe that really Son of Sam started in the phone book and on a late night drive. And I believe, of course, that starting this campaign from afar, and of course, why do I believe he started this campaign from afar? Because according to what the Netos told me, the attacks against their house started in 1974, and you're going to hear that in their own words today. Okay, and therein lies the heart of the contradictions that we're going to get into, because the police reports say something completely different. But I believe that in his own delusional mind, then this area that he was already fixated on became in his head the center of activity, and he moved to Pine Street in part to be closer to Wicker Street. So, of course, this hypothesis, my entire origin thesis on the origin of Son of Sam, which, by the way, I'm not wedded to. Okay, I'll gladly change my mind. That's what people don't quite understand about me, is that I'm not fixated on. I know that Maury Terry lied to us. I know he's guilty of fraud, journalistic malpractice, outright lying and deception, bullying, tactics, abuse, using people as human shields. Like, we already know that about Maury. Maury's quickly becoming rear view mirror stuff. Okay. And we're coming up with new theories as a Son of Sam community as we put this guy in the rear view mirror. And gracias a Dios that we're doing it. This guy's been mucking up true crime ever since 1987, creating how many conspiracy theorists out there who still believe in this stupid process stuff? Give me a break. But all I'm saying is that I'm coming up with new hypotheses. I'm a scientist of true crime. I'm doing this in real time. I'm making mistakes in public. If my thesis is horse crap, well, I'll be glad to tell all you guys, and then hey, we'll all learn something new together. But my entire hypothesis relies on the Neto story, the Netos telling me an accurate story in 2021, and even then, I could still be wrong. Okay, even if the Netos were accurate. And the attack started in late 74. There might be another explanation having nothing to do with Son of Sam, and we'll deal with that as we go. So as we continue along, and I hope everybody's just relaxing, enjoying yourselves. All right, who's this guy, Jimmy Touchdown? He's going. Okay, and do me a favor, Ruby. If I didn't get rid of this guy, just get rid of him. All right. So who were the Neto? You don't have a right to come in and screw up with the live stream in the chat. Sorry, you just don't have the right to do that. So who were the Netos? Let us deal with, of course, who were the Netos before we even get into the story, because although quite a few of you have been with me this entire year and a half, and you're very well versed in who the Neto family is, well, I can't assume that everybody reading this, watching this, especially 5-10 years from now, is going to have any clue who the Neto family was. So the Neto family was part of, in a sense, up until I came along, they were a footnote in the Son of Sam story. They were a sidebar. And they were because, well, Maury Terry, created them as a sidebar. he either didn't know their whole story or he knew it. Or, when we'll get into these contradictions, or maybe he just read these police reports and based his story on that, because his news articles are very similar to the police reports we're going to see. This was a family that was attacked by David Berkowitz, okay, starting officially on May 13th, 1976. Berkowitz moved to town in April of 76, and here's the car house. And those of you, is like, until this video series came along, you guys, this is all you had to go by visually. But now you have all these great visuals that we've all done together. And of course, you're going to see the inside of this house today. You're going to see a little bit of the attic. It's going to be amazing. You guys are going to love it. Of course, this house is no longer here, right here. But this is the Carr household right here. This is the famous backyard where nobody's buried, because Berkowitz totally made that up. And this is, of course, 18 Wicker Street. And here's, of course, 22 Wicker Street. And notice that I pronounce street with no H. Everybody, you're going to notice now, everybody around you on TV, down to the highest to the lowest, pronounces street with an H. Street. Street. I have no bigger pet peeve than putting an H where there is no H. So on 18 and 22 Wicker Street, the Netos lived here, and a family who we shall not name, although their names are in these police reports, but I am not going to name them because I have spoken to the owners of this house, and they didn't really want to be involved in any of this. And these are the two houses that actually, in reality, these two houses were on Berkowitz's mind a hell of a lot more than Sam Carr's house. Okay. And by the way, guys, I am very sorry if I'm not monitoring the chat. I'm just too into what I'm doing, guys. Like, looking at the chat takes me away from what I'm doing. So if you have any questions and I don't see them, hold them and call them later. I actually want people to call in. Okay. And we got John Catalano here. That's cool. We got John Catalano here. Him and I are hopefully going to be doing a show. We had to postpone it for about a week or so, but we're going to be doing a show hopefully on Voskerichian. So it's amazing, because if the cops hadn't planted the story about the talking dog, which of course is complete crap. We all know that story was complete crap. If they hadn't planted that story, I don't really think Sam Carr would have the Netos should have gotten much more attention than the Carrs, because as we're going to see, Berkowitz was much more obsessed with these people, and he was doing a hell of a lot worse things to 18 Wicker Street than he ever was doing to their Carr home. So, of course, this is an article that Maury Terry wrote, and key figures in the Berkowitz drama. You have Wheat Carr, Stephen Cassara, and you have here, and it's very hard to see, but you have a gentleman, Joaquim Neto, his wife, Maria, their daughter, Sylvia, and Mrs. Neto's mother, Andrea Almeida, the first victims. Okay. So we're going to see some of these people live today, and we're going to hear from some of them live today. Not live, but in the video. So Maury Terry did write about this. He wrote this was essentially how he was calling Yonkers Police Department out, essentially, in this series of articles. He was saying that, hey, YPD, you effed up. You had Berkowitz in your sights. If you had done any sort of investigation, YPD, maybe he would have gotten busted earlier. That was Maury Terry's really the kind of the gist what he was going for with these articles. He wasn't trying to come up with a new origin thesis. He was already onto his John Carr stuff. So he wasn't even thinking 18 Wicker Street having anything to do. I don't know if he saw these letters out of Berkowitz's apartment. There's indications that he did, and there's indications that he didn't. So it's really hard to say. But, in retrospect, Maury did about as good a job as he could have with the information at the time, especially if what the Netos told me in 2021 was completely false. Okay. And again, notice how I'm saying if, right? I'm holding out that possibility. Because remember, it wasn't me that came up with the Neto story. That's what people who want to get me, like some people want to get me over this Neto contradiction, right? And you think, like, we got Manny. It wasn't my story to begin with. All I did was report a story and then use the words and then build something from that, right? So if they told me a false story and then I told you, then the onus is on the family to correct that story. But we're okay with it all, because ultimately, as we're going to see at the end of the day, it really doesn't even matter. All right, we're going to continue. So of course, here are the articles in the newspaper about the Molotov cocktails, right, and all this stuff, and all this great old historical stuff from the newspapers. Clear pattern emerged in Yonkers crimes. Berkowitz waged guerrilla war by Maury Terry and Tom Bartley. By the way, I think it's Tom Bartley. Maybe I shouldn't even say this, but I think that he lived on a very interesting street vis-a-vis David Berkowitz in Yonkers, and I got to do a little bit more research on that. Okay, so we're not going to read these articles. I mean, it's pointless. It's just rehashing of kind of old news, and I summarized it for you very well. So Berkowitz waged war. Maury was basically saying Berkowitz was out there waging all this war, and the cops were kind of like not doing anything, and they let him do it, and because of that, they let him get away with several Son of Sam shootings. So again, here is where it gets kind of interesting vis-a-vis our story, because what we're dealing with today, guys, is essentially the timeline. It's coming back to that whole issue of the Neto timeline. In this article here, and we'll read it in a second, they say that the Molotov cocktail was the first incident that happened to them. Okay? And you see that right here. The Joaquin Neto family, 18 Wicker Street. See, blah, blah, blah. Shortly after 3:30, a Berkowitz slammed a firebomb only inches from the bedroom window. So that's establishing that was the first crime. 2 paragraphs later, then came the letters, dirty letters that threatened the family, said Mrs. Almeida. Now, this is the sister of Mrs. Neto, okay, Mrs. Almeida. Or maybe it was the mother of Mrs. Neto. Well, somebody has to do a, I should know this, but it doesn't really matter. But it wasn't Mrs. Neto saying that. So the timeline that's being established here, which is also you're gonna see, it's in these police reports, is the Molotov cocktail first, and the letters second, all starting a month after Berkowitz moved to town. Okay. And of course, this is a great article right here. I love this article because while it shows Mrs. Neto, first of all, over here, very beautiful. Still to this day, a very powerful presence. We're going to see her talking. We're going to see her speaking in Spanish today as well. It's going to be very, very powerful. And of course, here is the hole in the fence that was created by the bullet. Here is the famous area right by the side door where the rocket was, and here's the front entrance. And here's an interesting thing here, because it says here, about 150 feet from her home is the house of Sam Carr, an elderly man who once poked a gun in my ribs. Right, so Sam Carr did not have a great reputation. And of course, this is for the Mrs. Neto as communists crowd out there. I know there's like 1 or 2 people who are saying this, that Mrs. Neto was a communist. Here's the communist at her own small business that she started with her own money, building the American dream in Yonkers, down by City Hall, like a couple miles, a mile or 2 from where she lived. This is her working with her staff member. So this communist was employing people. And you can see here, Maria and Doris Hairstylist is open at 100 Nepperhan Avenue. The beauty shop was formerly known as Oscars. The new parlor on Nepperhan Avenue is the first business venture of partners Doris Andrade and Maria Neto of Yonkers. There she is, the very, very beautiful woman, Maria Neto, right here, doing a very anti-communist thing, which is opening a business. A small business, being an entrepreneur, after having fled Cuba, okay, to come to America. All right, so just so we're on the same page there. And of course, here is a screenshot of 22 Wicker Street here on the left. This was called the Horror Hotel by Berkowitz. And this was 18 Wicker Street on the right. Very similar vibes to Amityville Horror House, right? So, but no, this house is not haunted. This house is filled with very, very great vibes. Why? Because the Neto family is salt of the earth. This is like one of the nicest families I ever met in my life. Let me tell you something about this family. They didn't know me from a hole in the wall. I showed up to their house with a camera. This long-haired dude, they had no clue who the hell I was. And they invited me in and they laid out their soul to me. They bared pretty much everything to me right on the first day we met. And we became very close over this. Unfortunately, I haven't seen them in a while. I'm hoping that we can get Sylvia on at some point to clear up some of this stuff for us. Because I'm sure that even after today, we're all going to have questions on this, right? But this is the beautiful houses of 18 and 22 Wicker Street. All right, so real quick, Berkowitz was obsessed with Wicker Street. All right, actually, duh. Of course, I had I have to learn, like, I need to like put the window here and do this. Technically, I'm still getting my sea legs on all this. So here's the two houses I was showing before. Dumb. All right. So now, I told you before, Berkowitz was obsessed with Wicker Street. Way more obsessed than he was with Sam Carr's house. I don't understand for the life. Well, I do, because Sam had the name Sam, and it was his dog that was supposedly barking, talking to David. But I just went through all the letters, all the known writings of Berkowitz, and I called out just a sampling of every time that he writes Wicker Street, okay? Just to see how much he was obsessed by this. I, the master of the house of 18 Wicker Street. I am foul, vile, and wicked. Every murder is under 18 Wicker Street. All the urine under the steps does not equal my vile soul, says the Lord of 18 Wicker. Headquarters at 18 Wicker Street. Okay, give me a second. The commander of Yonkers has the name Captain Blood, and he's located at 18 Wicker Street, Yonkers. Here's a partial list of those with the highest ranks. And of course, Jack Cassara and Ann Cassara are at the top of the list. Wicker Street Gang is at the next to the list with Captain Blood. That was Joaquin Goncarlo. And then the Carr house is last. And then, of course, here's John Wheat, right? Johnny Rape Slayer. He just came up with this name in his delusional brain, and then it got morphed into rapist and suffocator of young girls. Okay. Another bit of journalistic malpractice by Maury Terry, because Maury Terry used one of Berkowitz's letters to write as fact. You should see the perverted details, right? Anyway, that's a whole other story. So all day long, the devil dog has been called the Wicker Street cult. Okay, the only cult that ever gets talked about amongst David Berkowitz is this Wicker Street cult, which I never heard of before these letters. Maury, how come you never told me about this cult? And it wasn't satanic; it just existed in Berkowitz's head. Now this says 18 under here, guaranteed, because you're going to see later that what he writes here is very similar to what the people in 18 Wicker Street, the people of, I can't get that out of my head now. The people of the world. Every time I say people of, I always think about Berkowitz now. My heart, soul, and mind, or whatever. I'm just going to assume this is 18 and 22 Wicker Street, okay? My heart, soul, and mind, or whatever is left of them, dwells at 18 Wicker Street in Yonkers. 22 Wicker Street is the house of worship for Satan and his army. I'm sorry, 18 Wicker Street. The people that dwell in there represent every abomination and vile thing that has ever dwelled on earth. Though they appear to be human, they are truly demons of Satan. They have, under the command of their master, set up a house of sacrifice and worship in Yonkers. This house is utilized as a resting stop for other demons that are traveling the earth. Today, the devil dog at Wicker Street is in great pain. Apparently, Joaquin Goncarlo, who lived on the third floor of 18 Wicker Street and whose name was found in the phone book, is low on blood. Yes, I'm right. The dog is screaming for fresh blood. Today is Friday, blood day. Today, I will spill blood for the people of, and it definitely says 18 Wicker Street, because there's Joaquin Blood and the Horror Hotel. 18 Wicker Street and 22 Wicker Street. The house of Joaquin Blood and the Horror Hotel. All right. So I think you guys are getting the point here. there was a grave injustice done by not delving into the Neto story more in 1977. Now, there were probably many reasons why that never took place, and I think part of it, or a main part of it, is the reticence of the family themselves. They just didn't want to get involved. We heard that Joaquin Neto really ran a tight ship there. He didn't want really to talk about this very much. He didn't want to draw too much attention and that kind of stuff. So I think that that's what was going on. But this brings us to now, of course, our contradictions. So what are the contradictions? What has come up that has directly challenged my work? Again, my work, not the words that I said, because the words that were said were said by the Neto family, not me. I just recorded them saying it. Okay. I'm talking about my work, my interpretation of their words. So the Yonkers Police Department detective reports offer up a certain timeline of the events. Okay. So we're going to see that when we read these police reports together, and we're going to go through every one of them in detail. I told you this was going to be a long show. We're going to easily go an hour and a half to 2 hours. I feel it. Okay. It's all about the timeline tonight. The Netos told me 74 to 77. The police reports say 76, 77. They did say nothing about 74 and 75. And I'm talking about the years, 1974 to 1975. So the Neto family in 2021, they tell a totally different story than what these previous detectives reports tell. The detectives reports tell us a story that is completely and 180 degrees at odds with what the Neto family told me on tape, on video, on record, repeatedly, at least 3 to 4 times, all on video, all with me trying to elicit the information as clearly as they possibly can. They had plenty of times to say, no, we're wrong. I've called them up, asked them off the air. Are you sure you're correct? Yes. Sylvia even pinpointed it to a day of a Mets game when the Padres beat the Mets really, she called it a rout. And I pinpointed that to an 8-2 victory because that was the only thing that could be considered a rout over the Padres, over the Mets at Shea Stadium from the years 74 to 77. There was a game on July 29th, 1974, that the Padres beat the Mets 8-2. Sylvia said she was at that game, and she remembers that when she was at that game that this was starting to happen. That's when the letters were starting and the calls were starting. Okay. So they've had a lot of time to change their story with me, and they've stuck to it repeatedly. So we have a contradiction here. We have a major contradiction. Now, why are these contradictions interesting to me as a researcher? Okay, because I'm actually extremely interested in this as a researcher, not only because I love for my own work to be challenged. I love my own work to be challenged. Again, what I don't like and what I don't countenance are idiots and fools who come and just piss all over everything in the comment section, right? Who don't have anything constructive. They're making fun of me. They're saying it's something against my family or something. Those people get blocked. Anybody who challenges me on the issues, which is all I've ever wanted and all I've ever asked for, they get respect. Okay? So this contradiction is extremely interesting, and I'm very happy it's happening. So far we have seen in the Queen's DA tapes, well, we've seen one thing. We've seen a he said and a she said scenario, and we saw this in Wheat and Fred Deagle, and we've done the videos on that. Where every instance where there was a contradiction between what those two people had to say, Eric and I analyzed it, and we showed you guys in stark detail every little contradiction. Okay, and so that was a he said, she said between two people speaking on tape. We have also seen one person, Tommy Zaino, say things in the audio, right? The Queen's DA tapes, which was totally at odds with other well-known footage of him. Okay, so this should make pretty clear sense, right? We have Zaino saying in investigative reports that it wasn't Berkowitz. He couldn't have gained the weight. There's no way in hell that it was him. I didn't think it was him then. It wasn't him now. He couldn't have run that fast. And then, of course, in the Queen's DA tapes, we have him saying the opposite. He was stocky. It was his own hair. It was a gray shirt. It was Berkowitz. He says it 3 times. Berkowitz, Berkowitz, Berkowitz. Okay. So that's one person, Tommy Zaino, saying things in the audio which contradict himself. So far we have he said, she said, and a self-contradiction, hearing the same person say something totally different. Those are the 2 things so far that we have dealt with in these Queen's DA reports that we must deal with, of course, as researchers, and make up your own mind. I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I have my opinions. You have yours. This is the first time in this Queen's DA dump that a police report is at serious odds with my work. Okay. Notice I didn't say my words. It's at serious odds with the words of the Neto family. Yes. Okay. But it's at serious odds with my work. My work needs reevaluation in light of these new contradictions. I need to deal with them as an honest researcher that I feel I am self-identifying as having integrity. I want to actually make sure that I am not I'm being honest with myself first and foremost. I mean, forget about everyone else out there. My main thing is to be honest with myself. I'm a Rush fan. Remember, I go by Anthem, that great first song on Fly By Night. Okay. So we need to deal with this, or I need to deal with this. And I'm very happy that you guys are along for the ride. And how many, we got 117 people watching. So that's amazing. I thank every last one of you. I know not every one of you is a fan of mine. I know some of you are reluctant fans. I know some of you are coming around because you've been seeing me crow from the rooftops that Maury Terry's been wrong for the last year and a half, essentially, except for the first month or 2. And now you're starting to see, and you're starting to feel that cognitive dissonance because the Queen's DA reports are all validating my thoughts on Son of Sam. And hey, welcome. You know, I got nothing against anybody with an open mind who might have thought something else, who's now struggling and thinking differently. This is a place where you can explore these things, talk it out. You have a positive, friendly people to talk to in the chat. Okay, it's a complete night and day from what you may be used to, those of you who are coming from the other perspective. All right, so we got a lot to get through. So let's deal with these Yonkers detective reports. So this is September 22nd, 1977. So it's a month and 11 days after the arrest. And it is a visit by Mr. Joaquin Neto to and the newspaper article. Wait, this is interesting because they're talking about the newspaper article in here. They might not even be talking about what the Netos said. Did anybody notice this at the top here? That the subject is a visit by Mr. Joaquin Neto, and the subject is about a newspaper article, which is the same newspaper article I showed you before with what I think is the wrong timeline. This whole show might be moot. But anyway, let's go through this. This is important, actually. I think that nobody noticed this, including me. On about June 1st, Mr. Joaquin Neto, known to me in the Portuguese community, appeared at the Internal Affairs Division on a personal basis and related an incident to the undersigned involving a firebombing at his home. Okay, now what's important here is what they talk about is really here. We don't have to go through all of this. Okay, and Ruby, do me a favor, link everyone in the chat to where they can find the Neto documents. So if anybody wants to print these out or look at them with me, they can do that. Thank you in advance, Ruby, for doing that. Okay. So Neto appeared at the Internal Affairs Office and informed the undersigned of the following events. All right. So Neto says it. Okay. It's not coming from the police, from the newspaper article. June 76. This is a month after the firebombing. The firebombing is on May 13th, 76. His wife received a letter which was typewritten on the envelope and block print on the letter. Sounds like Berkowitz to me. Said letter talked about hell, dogs, and the devil. Sounds just like Berkowitz to me. He stated he never saw the letter because his wife destroyed the letter and did not want him to see it and get alarmed. The letter was not shown to the police, according to Mr. Neto. July 76 to August 76. Okay, so phone calls, including one that the police responded and searched his house for dead bodies. Okay, that was a swatting incident that occurred, and we're gonna hear the family talk about that. All right, so we're seeing here that all the incidents, according to the Netos, started in May. In May, the firebombing, okay, and that's up here, May 13th, 1976, and then all of these things happening after, the letters after, the harassing phone calls, 1976, they start, okay? And then, of course, December 24th, 1976, the German Shepherd gets shot. Let me just read. To show the letter, received the underside appearance of the check of the dead name. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so basically, what this is saying here is that is the timeline. It starts in May 13th of 76 is when it starts, according to the police, and that the letters and the calls all come after. Okay, so we're establishing that that's what the police have said. Now, this is, again, more police reports. This is the police report for May 13th, 1976. Fire started by a thrown Molotov cocktail at apparently 3:30. Uh-oh. Don't tell Jason. It happened at 3:30. Keep that secret. A sign spoke to Mrs. Margaret DeGuardi, and she lived at 22 Wicker Street, who stated that at 3:30 she heard a crash in the vicinity. She looked out the window of her home. She saw Mr. Neto. Okay, listen, we don't need to go through everything here, but this is interesting right here. Mrs. DeGuardi stated that she did not see anyone after hearing the crash or glass, but stated that in the past, both she and other neighborhood people have been bothered by young black youths in the area who throw stones at windows and also have been in rear yards and break statues and lawn furniture. Okay, so that's interesting. So stones, we have heard of stones being thrown at the house. A sign spoke to the owner, Neto, who stated that he has not had any arguments with neighbors and cannot understand why the fire occurred. He stated that approximately 1 year ago, rocks were thrown to the second floor window and also a bottle was thrown at the house by youths in the area, but he did not know who was responsible. Okay, so this is important because the Netos told us that the attacks all started with rocks being thrown at the house. Okay, so and that was 74, but they also said that the letters started in 74 as well, as we're going to see. But I think that we can safely now take out the rocks and the bottles. This is important. Okay, this is very important because I'm changing a big part of my thesis. Whereas before in the Neto thesis, we had the rocks and the bottles being thrown by John Carr. Okay, starting the terrorism spree against the Netos that Berkowitz later joined. We now know that Berkowitz didn't know John Carr. They weren't friends. They had nothing whatsoever to do with one another. So you have to take John Carr out of it. And here's your explanation. The rocks and the bottles were actually thrown by neighborhood youths. So we can take the rocks and the bottles in 1974 out of the equation of the Netos. I am willing 100% to totally concede that point to those who want to see me concede points. The rocks and the bottles being thrown at the Netos family in 1974, because it says here, a year before this happened, right? So in 75, he was saying a year before this happened, the bottles were thrown, and he says it was by youths in the area. He seems to know. So I am willing to concede that the bottles and the rocks being thrown at the Netos house are out of the equation. We have to now worry only about letters, calls as the start of this. The police have the Molotov cocktail as the start of this. Okay. We're going to see a different story as told by the Netos. All right. I'm glad this happened. So now we've taken the rocks and the bottles out. So the rest of this is all about, we don't need to go through, like, we'll be here forever, but this is important here. Assigned also spoke to Mr. Jack Giancarlo. That's Joaquin Giancarlo. That's the famous devil dog, Mr. Captain Blood right here. Whoops, sorry. Okay, that's Mr. Blood right here, Jack Giancarlo. Okay, he lived in the 3rd floor. This is Maury Terry's, owner of the yellow Volkswagen, right? This guy didn't know English, and this right here proves it. He spoke to Mr. Jack Giancarlo to no avail. The guy didn't know English. He didn't know a word of English. He was a salt of the earth day laborer, didn't know a lick of English, church going guy. Wasn't involved in any of this stuff. Okay. And then here's important too. Assigned also interviewed one. This has to be Sylvia Neto because it's years, daughter of complainant. She told the assigned that in the early morning hours, she heard a couple of views in the area just prior to bottle being thrown against home. She stated that she also heard some noise outside the window, 1st floor apartment, and a young voice of a black say, "Eddie, Eddie, come here, come here." Sylvia then stated she heard a crash against the house, but did not see any flames at this time. She also stated that she heard heavy footsteps running down. Now, this is extremely important to remember for later. Extremely important to remember this for later because I asked them about Eddie, and Sylvia, in her own words, is going to talk to you about Eddie. The police got this wrong in this report. Or it's another contradiction. Okay? So these are all the, and these are really hard to read. So these are all like the little handwritten reports that they base the typewritten reports on. So again, it's like no damage to the outside. Question Robin Diacutis, female, white, 19 years. Really nothing in here of any major importance for our story. And so in the interest of just carrying on the narrative and not getting bogged down in massive amounts of detail, we're going to carry on. But I'm just perusing this and just trying to see if there's anything spoke with Andrea Almeida, 2nd floor. You're going to hear her name by her daughter. Keen Giancarlo, and neither of them heard anything. Okay. So in other words, this is just the reports that they base these things on right here. Okay. They use these and then they type up the report later. So if you read this, you're good with these. Okay. So now, December 28th, 1976. So this is after the dog shooting. Assigned this date proceeded to 18 Wicker Street regarding a dog shot on December 24th, 76, approximately 11 p.m. Upon arrival, spoke with Joaquin Giancarlo. He heard, again, I'm just going to peruse this to get to the major nut meat here that may be in contradiction, because I think the major contradictions that we're dealing with are just strictly timeline, not little details. But let's see here. Bounced off the aluminum siding. An attempt by assigned officers to retrieve said bullets proved negative due to the fact that Mr. Neto did not wish assigned officers to pry open aluminum siding in order to obtain said bullets. So that's why we actually thought that the bullets were still there in 2021, and you're going to see footage in a little while of the cops trying to retrieve the bullets out of their wall. So the rest of this is just pertains to getting the bullet out. Nothing major here. So here's something that's been so you all remember who've been with me for a while that there were these 2nd floor tenants that were questionable, that Mrs. Neto spoke of extensively as being like evil people. It should be noted for the purposes of the report that Mr. Neto stated that he had a previous tenant by the name of John Morrock. So now we've learned his name, Morrock. Okay, too bad it wasn't Moloch. Then the Maury heads would be like, there he is. I knew it. There he is, Moloch. Moloch lived at 18 Wicker Street. That was the Mr. Real Estate. All right. So Morrock said that he would get revenge if he was forced to move. So maybe some of those bottles were sent to maybe some of those original rocks and bottles were by Mr. Morrock. And then here it says that a Tony Theodore saw a red auto with a black top proceed north on Warburton after the shooting, but was unable to state whether that had anything to do with the shooting. So you can effectively throw away Tony Theodore's eyewitness testimony because it's also directly at odds with what the family saw. So anyway, we'll deal with that. And again, here is just another one of the handwritten reports that these things are based on. Gracias a Dios, it's at least legible. I was laughing every time I see now Chris Rogaki's handwriting. I'm like, oh man, there's Rogaki's handwriting again. I know I'm not going to be able to read this, but this was written by Chamberlain and Intervallo, the famous Chamberlain and Intervallo. Okay, dead dog again, having a house party. One Teresa Ramos, 21 years of age, stated that she heard a shot. Now, Teresa, I just want to let you guys know, Teresa Ramos, because her name's now out. She is Diana from our video series. I knew her name was Teresa. She didn't want to be identified when we did her video. Okay, so you're going to see her in our video as Diana. But Teresa Ramos is extensively interviewed by me, and you'll see her talk in a few minutes. So she stated that she heard a shot, proceeded outside the fence. Mr. Neto's German Shepherd, laying on the front of the house, said the dog had apparently been shot with a small caliber weapon. The undersigned also spoke to Tony Theodore, 52 years. And here's the thing about the car. Okay. And then so the rest of this stuff is about projectiles and getting projectiles out of the walls. This might be pertinent to our discussion. Here it is. This is very pertinent to our discussion. The assigned proceeded. Now, who is the assigned? Serlak. Okay, Detective Joseph Serlak. So we're going to read some of Serlak's other reports and compare and see like how accurate is Serlak when he takes reports and writes things down. Okay. But in either case, September 22nd, the assigned Serlak proceeded to 18 Wicker Street and thereat spoke with Maria Neto in regards to any threatening letters that she had received in the past regarding this investigation. Now, this is important because the cops were doing what I did in 2021. They went to her and they asked her pertinent questions about when she received letters. She told them, apparently, or not, we're going to deal with why these contradictions may exist. She told them something very different than she told us. Let's proceed. Mrs. Neto related that a couple weeks after the arson of her house, which occurred on May 13th, 1976, a letter addressed to her was intercepted by her mother, Andrea Almeida, which her sister, Sylvia Estabanez of, and we don't know where it was, read same without knowledge of Mrs. Neto. This letter expressed hate for the Neto family and further that the dogs of hell and the Neto family had to be destroyed. This letter was not signed, and it was immediately destroyed by Mrs. Neto's mother and sister. Mrs. Neto was not informed of this letter at the time because she was suffering from a nervous condition. The police department was not notified of this letter. Mrs. Neto stated, this is the nut meat. This is everything that we're talking about. This is the entire crux of our discussion. Mrs. Neto stated that at no time did she receive any other letters, nor did she receive any threatening phone calls. Okay, now, so this says something very important. So let's deal with the police timeline here. And please take notes. The police timeline is May 13th, the Molotov cocktail. Then according to the family, because again, the police were getting from the family. The police weren't making this up. The police were getting info from the family. According to the family, the next incidents were the threatening calls and letters, culminating with, of course, the dog Rocket getting shot on New Year's Eve, 1976. So that's the timeline that's been established by the police. Okay, and the rest of these... dead dog again, we don't need to. Oh no, we already read that one. Okay, so now the Neto story in 2021. Okay, now the Neto story in 2021. So now let me stop this screen share and let me go to our video, because I have a whole video prepared for you that I've edited up and made nice for you guys. So real quick, before we get into the video, I just need to take a little drink. Put on my headphones. and I want to establish something extremely important. I want to establish the contradiction again. So the contradiction, and this is huge because this means that if I'm wrong about the Neto story, or if the Netos told me the story wrong and I reported it wrong and I got the wrong story from the Neto family, which is the most accurate way I should put this, because I didn't make any of this up. I'm just innocently living here, hearing people talk to me, trying to make sense of it all. Okay. So if my Neto story that they told me was wrong, then my origin story of Son of Sam is out the window. Okay. But we have a contradiction between what the police said and what the Netos told me in 2021. Now, you haven't heard what the Netos told me in 2021. We're going to get to that, and you're actually going to see them say it, them actually in their own words, the real people, the real Netos, not a book, not research out of an internet. Okay, I spent a lot of time with this family in their home. Police told us in these reports that the firebombing was first, the calls and letters came next, and that at no other time were there any other letters or threatening letters or calls. Okay, so no long, extensive thing of calls, no long, extensive thing of letters, certainly nothing before May 13th, 1976. Okay. Everything started to the Netos, according to the police and according to what the Netos told them in 1977, but allegedly, because they could have gotten it wrong. I mean, we're going to talk about that. According to the police, it all started a month after Berkowitz moved to Yonkers, April 76. It all started with May 13th, 1976, the firebombing. Let's listen to the Neto family. And this video is over a half an hour long. And I'm going to stop it to comment. So I told you this is going to be a long show. So get yourself ready because, I've been preparing for all week. I am into this heavy. I want to really have this video be the clearinghouse for Neto information. So let's deal with the origin of the contradiction in the first place. And of course, it all started with one simple question that I asked the Neto family when we first turned on the camera in December 2021. And let's just start it. Now, how long before his arrest did all this occur? What
2 years.
Oh. How long before the arrest did all this occur? 2 years. She just said it. 2 years. Okay. He was arrested in August 77. This takes us to August 75, which already brings us to what? August 75. You have 4 more months of the year and then 4 more months until 8 months before Berkowitz moved to town. Okay. So that's the origin of this contradiction. 2 years.
2 years.
So this happened in 1975?
Yes. 2 years.
75, 76. And it was like, it was happening for 2 years, and every month or 2 months, something would happen.
Okay. So you heard Sylvia very, very unequivocally, very matter-of-factly say, yes, 2 years, 75, 76. Every month something would happen. So this indicates a long terror spree, a long period of time, which is contradictory to what we just saw in the police report. We just saw starting on May 13th, 76, and a couple harassing letters and some calls, and no other threatening calls or at any other time. They just said something completely different. So let's hear about the different crimes now. Now, we're not going in any order. We're not trying to establish a timeline. We are just strictly having the Neto family tell you in their own words about the crimes that occurred to them at the hands of David Berkowitz. First, we're going to start with the letters. Did you ever see the letters that were sent here? Okay, now this is Teresa Ramos, okay? She went by Diana. Oh, duh. Sorry, guys. This is so let me go back a little bit.
Something happened.
Okay, so the various crimes is told by the Netos. All right, so the letters are first, and this is Teresa Ramos. She went by Diana in our video series. We never even knew that these police reports existed with her name on it. Okay, so that we weren't trying to be coy. We were just trying to protect her identity, but it's out now. So this is Teresa Ramos from the police reports. ever see the letters that were sent here to this
One
house?
time,
What did they say?
my grandmother brought a letter,
Tore them up.
but I noticed they had crosses, like upside down cross and a star.
Upside down crosses.
Yes, and the 5-pointed star upside down, the pentagram.
You're sure of that?
Yes.
And they say the top of this house is the queen, and they're gonna burn this house from the top to the ground.
So the queen lived in the attic.
Yeah.
From what I recall,
Mm-hmm.
my aunt read the letter, and the letter said was like the demons in the attic above the 3rd floor, they would come down to have orgies with us in the basement. That's what the letter said, because at that time.
So there's that word attic. Remember how Berkowitz loved that word attic, right? In his letters out of his apartment. So here you have Teresa saying that the letters that came to their house use the word attic. So of course that is very indicative that these letters were being sent by Berkowitz and not John Carr.
The family used to get together for Thanksgiving, for December 24th that we celebrate that. We used to have a big dinner in the basement. So our family, we have families in Elizabeth, New Jersey, that will come down. We will get together to have dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the letter said, that there were demons in the attic, and they will come down to the basement to have orgies with us.
It's exactly what Berkowitz wrote in his letters after.
Yes, and that's what my aunt read.
Did he
that letter.
mention
That's
demons more than once?
I didn't see that letter. The letter that my aunt read, I didn't see it, but that's what the letter said, because my aunt,
But just one
She
time?
told you.
I heard, she said to my grandmother.
That's what they told you. Yeah,
Yes.
and that's definitely true, because we
Yeah,
know
that
he
there
sent
were
the letter
demons
saying-
in the attic, and then they would come down to have orgies with us in the basement with the family.
The shooting is the culmination of everything. Now, this is Jackie Neto. She's the cousin of the Neto family. She was there the night of the shooting, and she was well aware of all this this stuff occurring. And I interviewed her in a video. But before that, of course, we had rocks, you had letters, you had calls. Did you ever experience any of these letters or calls? Did you ever see any of these letters?
I saw letters that were sent to my grandmother, and
Please explain what you saw from start to finish in as full detail as you can remember. Now, her grandmother is Andrea Almeida again, okay? So these letters were coming to actually to the 2nd floor. They weren't coming to the Netos per se. They were coming to the Almeidas, who were related to the Netos, the mother of Maria Neto. But regardless, not the Netos directly. They were coming to Andrea Almeida and her daughter, Teresa Ramos.
I don't remember the exact wordings on it. I mean, it was a very long time ago, so
Okay.
I could tell you he had symbols on it, and my grandmother used to say, this is satanic. This is a sick individual, and
What were the symbols?
It was like the symbols that are on the letters that you see on the Son of Sam, just like that.
So like
on the top or on the
pentagrams.
bottom. One I saw on the top, the other one I saw on the bottom when he was in his closing. There's like an axe with those signs. And
Wait. I didn't understand. It was like a what with the signs?
it's like not an axe, but it was like a line with a crossover, and then it had some, circles. And
So she's actually giving a much more accurate report of the Son of Sam symbol than Tom Turkey and Darlene ever did. She's saying that there was basically a something that looked very similar to the Son of Sam symbol on one of the Neto letters, proving even more that Berkowitz wrote the Son of Sam letters, because Berkowitz wrote the Neto letters.
stuff on it. It was strange.
Do you remember the handwriting? Oh, you're lighting.
The handwriting wasn't like normal handwriting. It was kind of like graphic. Like it wasn't like your regular person writing a note.
So it was graphic lettering,
Yes.
like block lettering.
Like yes.
I'm gonna bring in something real quick. I just want to share it with you. This is one of the Son of Sam letters. Whoops, share screen. Give me a second. Window, boom, share. So this is one of the Son of Sam letters, Jackie, that's written in block handwriting. Was this something that you remember?
Yes. The writing.
Very extremely interesting, because your cousins did not speak about the handwriting. They I don't even know if we asked, but they didn't remember the handwriting. So you're sure that it was in graphic lettering like you see here?
Yeah, I looked at it, and then my grandmother ripped it up and threw it out. That the letter that I saw, and he was confused because he was calling.
One thing you're going to notice with all of these recollections is how remarkably consistent they are with each other. Okay. And I don't think that this family, they didn't know I was coming down the pike to talk to them about Son of Sam. They were like, you're the first person that's ever spoken to us about this in 50 years. So this family didn't get together and come up with a story to tell me. Okay. They were all recalling this on their own, and they're all telling remarkably similar stories. So I think that this gives a lot of internal credence to the Netos. But then again, let's carry on, because again, contradictions. Police are telling us May 13th, the attacks start, and very few letters, just a few. They came after them, no other calls, very, threatening, no other threatening calls at any other time. And we're getting a slightly different story here. And when we listen to the family talk about the timeline, it's going to be even more interesting.
Calling her name and my cousin's last name. So she was like,
wait,
I'm an old lady.
This is important.
Because he was calling her name and my cousin's last name.
So whoever wrote the letter was using names like the first name of one and the last name of the other. Again, he didn't know these people. He was just finding names out of a phone book.
So she was like, I'm an old lady. He's getting confused with me and my granddaughter.
Uh-huh.
And my cousin was really afraid at that time. I mean, most of New York was.
Sorry, Teresa's the granddaughter of Andrea. Okay, I'm starting to get this all right.
Because of what was going on.
Right.
So she would always wear her hair in a ponytail, always keep it up. Everybody was afraid. So my grandmother did get quite a few letters, and I know that my aunt was getting letters. I know my aunt was getting calls because the dog was barking.
So here you have the family talking about lots of letters, lots of calls, talking about the calls to dogs barking. How come none of that was reflected in the police report? Okay.
And my grandmother would just get the letters and phone calls. And I remember my cousin saying, there's somebody that keeps calling and just breathing heavy on the phone.
Uh-huh.
And so that kind of stuff.
The phone number upstairs, I used to live upstairs, and the number.
So now Jackie is her cousin. Okay. That's Teresa. Teresa and Jackie, they are cousins. Andrea is Jackie and Teresa's grandmother. Andrea is sisters with Maria Neto, who's sitting right over here. So Maria Neto's sister is Andrea. She lived on the second floor. Her granddaughter was Teresa and Jackie. Sylvia was Maria's daughter.
Number was under my grandmother's name, Andrea Maida. Let me explain before you. It was under my grandmother's name. So he used to call my house and telling my grandmother that she was beautiful. And my grandmother was saying, because my grandmother didn't speak English, she said, can you talk to this person? How can you tell an old lady that she's beautiful? He's probably think it's you, right?
Right.
So when I answered the phone, he used to tell me, Andrea, you're beautiful. And I kept asking, who are you? Who is it? He hang up. He used to call and complain that the dog, Rocket, used to bother him, like he used to bark at night too much. He complained about the dog here. Remember, Marie?
Here.
Now, that is absolutely true. You know why? Because Berkowitz admits to doing that in his letters to the psychiatrist. He said that the dogs at 18 Wicker Street were basically hell. They were creatures from hell, and they would bark all the time, and that their vocal cords were huge, and that he tried every which way to get them to stop. Calls, letters. You just had Teresa say that he would call about the dog. We didn't hear about that in the police report. So we're seeing that these police reports are actually leaving out quite a few things. Whether they asked the family or not, that we don't know. But we're seeing that there's some issues with the police report, or there's major issues with what the Netos are telling us here. But does this sound like to you like they're lying to me or coming up with a story? I mean, I don't know. You be the judge. I'm not going to make that judgment for you.
To Sylvia.
Hold on, let me go back.
To bother him like he used to bark at night too much. He complained about the dog here. Remember, Marie?
Here to Sylvia.
So he used to call
He
to
called-
Sylvia.
So someone called for Sylvia.
Oh yeah, I told you the other.
Right.
One night, they
So the calls came to Andrea, they came to Teresa, they came to Sylvia. We didn't hear about any of that in the police report. We didn't hear about the calls about the about the barking dogs. Okay. All I'm just saying is that maybe there's some issues with those police reports. I don't know. I don't know. That's all I'm saying. So let's hear about the Molotov cocktail, the famous, what the police say was, and according to the Netos, was the first incident ever.
he threw Molotov, how you call
Molotov cocktail.
And my daughter slept that night with my mother.
Upstairs,
In the same
second
window,
floor.
upstairs, to make a company to my mother.
Uh-huh.
Then, where they send the cocktail Molotov, my house burned all in the front. And they don't hit the bed where they are because we have
On a screen.
the screen. And then this why they don't burn inside where she was.
Fell down and it exploded.
Right.
In the front, I can show you.
The Molotov cocktail hit where?
Up there. Sylvia could see the flame because they were sleeping in that room. That was my bedroom. I used to sleep with my grandmother. But I moved out, with my mother for 3 months, and then I came back after the fire.
So you were not there when the Molotov cocktail
No,
hit. Teresa, Sylvia was there.
And my grandmother. Sylvia was sleeping with my grandmother.
Sylvia was sleeping. So Sylvia was up there the
Yes.
night of the firebombing.
Yes.
Someone called the cops to tell them that Joaquin had gone crazy inside the house and killed everybody.
Seven
Joaquin
people.
is your husband.
My husband.
Yes, Joaquin is my father.
7 or 5 people is dead here, they say.
So when my parents' bedroom is back there, and then and my bedroom was here, and they start knock, the cops, like it was like somebody was bringing down the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Knowing my father and knowing what was going on in our house, he could have picked up that shotgun
Right. And
they would have shot him and killed him,
right there.
But he came out and then
So we're seeing the level of violence of these attacks, right? These were not normal attacks. And this was my whole thesis before, that before Berkowitz came to town, the attacks were relatively minor. Letters, calls, and rocks. And that's why we thought it was John Carr, right? Now we know John Carr is out of this completely. So Berkowitz is responsible for the letters and the calls. Probably not the rocks. The rocks now we can take out of it. That was probably youth. Okay. But Berkowitz, the letters and the calls, but still the issue is timeline. Again, right now we're just giving you an overview of the crimes that were committed, and then we're going to talk about timeline.
he opened the door and he saw that it was the cops, and they were pointing.
But this was major violence. Molotov cocktails and then a swatting incident where the entire family could have been shot.
Here, like on the fence, the cops are pointing at us.
Oh my
And
God.
then he cheese and back on my father. But, don't go. And she gonna be in back of him.
Whoa.
To my because we don't know who is.
They were setting you guys up to be shot by the police?
Right, they kill us. Then the police go open the door. Right away, he see here all this. He don't pay permission. He open the other door.
He went
Go upstairs all the house. And then when they come back, I'm sorry, we don't know who they are.
This is the piano that was being played the night that the shooting. So I want to reenact this. Can you go back in there? And so
It's
you
not
were
the
there.
same.
It doesn't matter.
I was
So you
here. I was sitting down.
so you were sitting here.
Right, I was sitting here, right? It was a different piano.
Don't worry, we're not going to get you on.
It was
Yep.
an old Steinway piano, like an upright. I was playing, I heard the shot. I went out here. No, I came out, my cousin Jackie that was here, and she said, don't come out. Then I went back to the piano, I sat here, right?
Right.
30 seconds, no more than a minute, I heard a second shot. Then I went to look through the window. There were shades. These are different kind of shades.
Right.
You know, the old. I heard somebody running, like I heard somebody moving. Then my cousin was with me. I went out, and Wendy Rockefeller was the one that went downstairs to call her dad, who was a marshal at that time.
Right.
When I opened the door, these people came and they were running down, you know.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
So you opened the door and you came out here.
I came here. This building wasn't there. Two of my uncles went down the hill. Jack Neto, Humberto Rockefeller, and Manny went downstairs. And I could see the guy running, and the off-white color car
Wasn't
waiting
here.
for David Berkowitz. I saw him get in. You can see now because it's a building, but the car was
Was on
far
Warburton
facing-
Avenue there.
Facing south, right across the street. There was somebody waiting for David Berkowitz in the car.
So the room where you were playing the piano was here, and the shooting was here.
Right, the dog was right there. Then everything happened so fast. Then I came here. The dog was laying here on his left side. I asked the dog, Rocky, what's the matter? The dog tried to talk to me. And I noticed he had a big bullet, a big hole in his neck, on his right side of his neck, and he died. Blood came out of his mouth. That was it.
And then the bullet was right here.
Yes, but I heard 2 shots.
Well, one went into the dog and one
I guess
went
the
in
first
here.
shot. Yes.
And just looking from the trajectory,
Yes.
not that I'm a police officer and can tell, but it looks like
And there were other ones here, I think, because
it was shot right from that
Right, but
from the
there-
aqueduct.
listen, man, there were other shots here. I think there were other holes in here, but they put this thing.
These are new?
Yes. There were shots in here too, and let me see. Yeah, not only here, there were holes in here too.
Really? Okay, so more than one shot.
Of course, this is not the only one. There were other ones here.
Is this one?
That I don't know about that.
I don't think so.
But I know there were holes in here, in this area. That was not the only one.
Okay, so now we've heard Teresa's recollection of the shooting, and she mentioned that Jackie was there. You saw her mention that Jackie was there. So now let's hear Jackie's remembrance of the shooting. Bring us to the night of December 24th, 1976. What did you hear, see, experience, witness?
So everybody, the whole family, Joaquin's family and Maria's family, we were all together for Christmas Eve. We were upstairs. Diane was playing the piano. Sylvia was there.
She called her Diane because at that point, again, we were calling her Teresa. We were calling Teresa Diana to protect her identity. Okay. So that's why Jackie just said Diane.
3 other cousins were there. She was playing Christmas songs, and we heard a shot, and the room trembled. And
So it was a really loud shot.
yes, it shook the house, the corner of the house where the shot came from. And Diane was going to run out right away, and I was like, no, don't go out. That it's dangerous. But then, like, not even a minute later, I can't tell you the exact timing, a second shot.
Yeah, are you guys noticing the absolute how these stories line up completely? Now, that has nothing to do with our thesis tonight. We're dealing again with timeline tonight, strictly, because that's where the contradictions lie. But notice how this family is just remarkably consistent. And so far, I am not perceiving that they're lying to me. I think you guys out there in the chat are feeling the same way, that this family is remarkably truthful. So let's carry on.
And she just ran out to the door because the dog started, crying. So we knew. She looked at me. She's like, "Rocket's hit." So she went over to where Rocket was, and he had a bullet through his neck that went out the other side. And Sylvia and her cousin Wendy, that her father's the FBI marshal. she was calling her dad to come up. So they came up, my uncle, my dad, and my uncle Rockefort came up, and we were already by the dog. And when they went to be by the dog, I went back on the porch and to the end. Now, next door to Maria's house, there was a parking lot and a bar, but you could see clearly across to Wilburton Avenue. And
So now we're talking, just for the audience's sake, now we're talking looking towards the river. In other words, looking west down the hill. That's
so,
where that's the bar, and was a parking lot and a bar and Warburton. Okay.
and then there was a white car, double parked underneath the light. So my uncle and my uncle, my dad, and my two uncles, right? They're running, and I didn't know at the time it was the son of Sam or David Bergowitz. I saw a guy running with a rifle down the street. They were still busy with the dogs, but my uncle went right after him, but he was already like all the way down the street turning, and he got into the car on the passenger side. Someone else was driving the car. And I always said, after the whole story of the son of Sam came out, that he was never alone that day. Someone else was with him. And that it was almost like he planned it, because when he got into the car, the barrel of the rifle was sticking out of the window. So the window was down.
And it was a cold night, so
It was
there's
a
no
cold
reason.
night, and the person that was running, that was bizarre too, because he didn't have a coat on. He had like a short sleeve shirt with dark jeans, or black or dark jeans. That's what I saw. And I couldn't tell you that I can identify the person that was driving's face. I can tell you that he had straight hair under like by the neckline, straight.
Okay. You mean straight like mine, or was it like parted off to the sides, straight?
I just saw the straight hair down to the neckline.
Could it have been a woman?
No,
Okay.
it was a guy, and I could see the color of his jacket sleeve. It was khaki, and I remember that because the light was shining right on him, but I couldn't see his face. I could never, if you asked me to identify him, I could never be able to identify his face.
Right. So khaki, like is that, what is that? Like a green or a brown?
Like an army green.
It's a what?
Like an army green.
Okay, so you just heard her talk about how Berkowitz got into a passenger side car. Both said it was a white car. One said it had a black top. That describes Berkowitz's car to a T. Yeah, it was technically yellow, but it was more cream colored, and it presented as white, let's be honest, an off-bone white. So remarkable recall, remarkably consistent. But again, we are concerned mainly with timeline. So what we've established so far is the crimes. You've heard from the family about the crimes themselves. It's just establishing a feel for this family, okay? And a feel for their stories, and a feel for whether you think they're credible or not. And again, that's up to you, not for me to dictate to you whether you think they're credible or not. I personally think they are. You may disagree, okay? But we've established that the police, well, for one, did not have anywhere near all those stories in their police reports, okay? Number two, they have a timeline that starts with the Molotov cocktails. And I know I'm repeating myself here, but I do that as a teacher. I do that on purpose. Repetition is key, all right? So before we get into the timeline of the Neto family, let's look at a couple of really cool little odds and ends. So in 2021, because I became friends with all the Yonkers PD, and they loved our video series, they came on board once I found the cross on the tree in Untermeyer Park. They started taking us very seriously after that. And I became first name basis with a lot of these guys, and I was able to call them up. And we got them to, the Netos told us that the bullets were never recovered. So that gave all the cops a hard on, and the next thing I know, the major Yonkers detectives are over at the Neto family. So here's footage of that. Just showing you again the reach of our video series. So there's the crime squad. And then this guy right here, I don't want to identify him by name because he never wanted to be identified, but he was a very big help to us. It's this guy who was responsible essentially for getting us the 57 pages of Berkowitz's writings, because he's the actual one who distributed them to people. He was given to them by somebody who was ostensibly on my team, but I wasn't given to them. But then this cop here spread them far and wide, and I ended up getting the files from someone completely another ex Yonkers cop. But this guy was a major detective. He's now retired. And so there they are in the same spot. You can see, we're not making up this stuff. This is serious stuff here. They're looking for those bullets. And you hear them saying 1976. So they had the panel off. If you can see here, the aluminum siding is off. He did take a picture and he did send me this picture. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to this picture, but there was a huge hole in the like a divot, not a hole, but a divot in this wood. And this was a very, very big, thick oak beam. And there was a big, probably inch deep divot in there, and big, like the size of like a $50 or more. But there was no bullet.
Oh, absolutely. But the other thing is, this is the No, try this way. I got an answer.
Okay, now here's something that's might be controversial. Okay, so the getaway driver, right? We've been dealing now with this getaway driver, and who was it? Was it John Carr? Well, probably not, because Berkowitz didn't know John Carr. He knew him out of the phone book. He found his name in the phone book, and he made up some relationship that he had with John Carr, but he didn't know him. And he actually admits to that in the psychiatrist letters as well. So John Carr was most likely not the getaway driver that night for Neto. But in listening to all of the Queens DA tapes, Mike Lorenzo came up with something extremely interesting that he pointed out to me. Now, he's not saying that this is a fact. This is just his detective mind picked this up, and he pointed it out to me. He was listening to the Richie Sparazza tape, and Richie Sparazza was the only person on this tape besides Berkowitz's friends from childhood who had a relationship with Berkowitz where they hung out socially. Listen to what Sparazza says about them hanging out.
And that was one Christmas Eve afternoon, he stopped at my house.
Remember when the shooting of Rocket was? Christmas Eve, 1976.
After work, we gotten out of work early, and I invited him in. The mailman was there, and we had a few drinks. My wife had eggplant. My wife wasn't home, but we had a couple of eggplant sandwiches. And then he went on his way, and I stayed home. It was Christmas Eve at what time, approximately?
Now, he says he went on his way and he stayed home. He was very sure to make sure that he said that he was very, very sure to make sure that he said that he stayed home and he went on his way.
Oh, the date was, I believe, 2 years ago. And it was...
So you're saying 77?
I believe it was that.
So it'd be Christmas Eve, 1977.
Yeah, I believe it was that.
Or was it 76, do you recall?
I really don't know the dates. The dates, I really don't know.
Okay, so this is very important. So Richie Sparazza could have been with Berkowitz on New Year's, on Christmas Eve, 1976. Okay, it's a possibility. Out of all of the people that we have seen around Berkowitz, this is the only person that there is a possibility of. I'm not saying that he was there. Mike Lorenzo is not saying that he was there. But what Mike Lorenzo, a 20-year veteran detective, pointed out to me was that out of all these tapes, this is the only person with David Berkowitz on a Christmas Eve. And he's not sure whether it was 76 or 77. So the possibility exists that this guy Speraza was lying through his teeth and he was with Berkowitz that night. And I can see Berkowitz just saying, hey, just hold the car here. I'm just going to go shoot this dog. And Speraza is probably like, yeah, whatever, man, you know, I'll just wait here. We'll drive away. I mean, I could actually see that happening. Remember, Speraza, we already know Richie Speraza. He has been named in the Rothstein files as an accomplice of David Berkowitz. So Speraza is not a new name to us here. And Speraza, according to the Maury people, was a getaway driver at some of the Son of Sam crimes. Okay. Now, I don't believe it because I don't believe that that Berkowitz worked with anybody. But Speraza has been named as a getaway driver, and Speraza right here in his own voice is saying that he was with Berkowitz on a Christmas Eve, whether it was 76 or 77, it doesn't matter. Oh, wait a second. Jack Myers brought up a very good point. Couldn't have been Christmas 77. Burke already caught. Jack, you're a freaking genius. It was 76 most likely. So now, if this is true, Jack Myers has just placed Richie Speraza with David Berkowitz on December 24th, 1976. Speraza has been named by the Maury people as an accomplice of Berkowitz, as a getaway driver, in fact. So I am calling out right now, I am making the pronouncement that it was Richie Speraza as the most likely candidate. I'm not saying it was him. Please note that I am not saying it was him. I am saying it was the most likely candidate to be the getaway driver that night of the shooting of Rocket. And of course, then that would bring up a whole bunch of can of worms regarding Richie Speraza's involvement in Son of Sam. But I have to point out the obvious, that driving away from the scene of a dog shooting, and maybe he didn't even know it was going to happen. Maybe Berkowitz was like, hey, let me just get out to take a piss. I'm just going to run up the block here in the woods in the aqueduct to take a piss, right? Just because if Richie Speraza was there that night, it doesn't necessarily mean he was a accomplice on Son of Sam. We have to start thinking like maturely about these things, okay? We're not Maury had us connect everything. And the result of that is that people think that my grandfather was a guy named Louis Grossman in the Bronx who was a pornographer when my family actually comes from Puerto Rico and Pittsburgh. Okay? So Maury effed up your minds. We have to start thinking about separating things, and that one thing doesn't necessarily follow from another. Well, Eric, Berkowitz was a strong guy. He could have, well, you got a point, Eric, but no one ever said Richie Speraza was an altar boy. The guy was busted for embezzlement and fraud. He's in the newspaper articles. We've done a lot of research on him. All right, so now here's the nut meat, and I told you this was going to be a long show. Okay, this is where it all comes together. Remember, and I'm going to repeat once again, the police took a report from the Netos, and in that report, it said that the Molotov cocktail came first. Then came the letters, and that there wasn't this huge campaign. It was just like a couple threatening letters and some calls, and at no other time were there any other letters or calls. That's what the police report said. Okay? Let's listen to the family in their own words. And this is about 12 to 13 minutes long. But here we go, working out the timeline for you guys. And why did I do this? Because this is the crux of my entire origin thesis on Son of Sam. I believe Berkowitz started the Neto crimes in 74, 75, and it culminated into an escalation into the Son of Sam crimes. It's very important that the Neto timeline be accurate for my thesis to be true. One of the things that I want to do is, I know that we talked about this before, Maria, and I'm very sorry to go through it again, but I want to just nail down and pin down the timeline of everything that happened to you. And I want you to understand that one of the reasons I did this was because I realized how important this was. Okay, as a journalist, I realized that I was putting myself out on a limb here and that it was this timeline that was the whole crux of the matter. I had no clue that there was going to be a contradiction in the police report. Didn't even know a police report existed. But this shows you the kind of researcher that I try to be, which is of the utmost integrity and accuracy. Remember, I'm not making any of this stuff up. I'm getting the story from the family. They're the ones telling me the story. I want to make sure it's as accurate as possible.
Because Berkowitz did not move to this building up here until April of 1976. You said that these incidents started before April of 1976. They started in 75, you're saying?
Look how unequivocal they are. They're shaking their head. Yeah, they're not hesitating.
The letters he called here to my daughter.
The first thing that happened
He's the one called who we
Okay.
call my daughter. Then my husband answered the phone, and he say, "Who you are?" My daughter is a child. To somebody call it. Please, I want to know where you are. They hang the phone, and this happens so many times. They call my daughter.
And this happened before rocks throwing, before letters.
That is when the thing is starting.
Okay, so right there, she's saying that's when everything started with the letters. She doesn't say that it's the Molotov cocktail that starts this, like the police said. Like the police said that she said. She's saying that the whole thing starts with the letters. The whole thing, everything started with the letters. Okay? So that right there is a contradiction. The police report says the first thing was May 13th, the Molotov cocktail.
What was the first thing that happened? The
Sylvia.
rock throwing, or did you receive phone calls?
You don't remember?
I remember because I so scared, and I take her all the time to the school. I think something gonna happen because nobody had to call her.
So what was the first
I
thing?
don't care exactly. I told you that the rock come first, and that is something I don't.
You don't remember the rocks
Yeah.
or the letters first.
Then
Okay, so she says she doesn't remember, so we're going to work it out a little more.
after those letters, that's when that happened. He said fire the house. We had the fire. Remember?
After the letters is when the fire, she just said it. She's like, after the letters is when the fire happened. So she just said it right there. After the letters, the fire.
Look, I
The
don't
Molotov.
say who's first or
La
who's.
piedra fue después del fuego, yo creo, ¿no?
He. So many things in my head.
It's okay, you got time.
So when I think what I remember is the letters. They call it to my daughter.
En la puerta.
And the letter they send it to her, I don't be here. I don't know nothing about those things happen. Son of son and nothing.
Right.
See, this is the key right here. All right, this is the nut meat, okay? Because this is the whole crux of the matter. She said she was not there when the letters first came to the house. This is important, okay? It's going to reveal itself why it's important in a minute. But she was not there. She was in the hospital when the letters came. So now we're going to pinpoint when she was in the hospital, okay?
When I go to the hospital, I don't know nothing. We don't know, nobody have that scare about this man.
Right.
But only I remember they told my husband, you had to be in a place with the wife Betty. She had to be, because I have, that night I have told what I have with my nervous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they told my husband, the doctor told my husband she had to be in quiet place and no, which all the time I have quiet house, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And this is those things. Then after is when all those problems start. Then it's after when we're so scared about all those things happen, we're gonna want to sell the house almost for nothing.
Right.
And this young guy come to buy our home, and he don't have the leg or something, but he's already have everything planned. But I feel so sorry for him. Then I don't can keep that in my heart. I said, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm gonna sell this house because we have problem in this house and we are scared because I think I can run it, but you don't can run it.
Right.
That I remember perfect.
So he'd refused to buy the house at that point.
No, he don't see it no more.
Because in the newspaper article that you have down in the basement that you showed me and that I have at my house to read, it says that the first thing that happened was May 13th, 1976. Molotov cocktail at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
But so what I'm trying to pin down is because that's when Berkowitz is living in this neighborhood. He moved in April, the month before. But you're saying that things happened before the Molotov cocktail?
Yeah, the calling,
the callings, and then
they start with the calling.
It started with the calling. Okay.
And then, no, first the letter, right?
Well, we have the letters in the newspaper article, and again, the newspaper could be completely inaccurate. In fact, I think it is, but it has the Molotov cocktail happening first, then the letters. No?
No, because my mother was in the hospital. That was the whole thing, is that she was in the
the
hospital.
letter was in the hospital.
And they didn't
And nothing
tell her.
happened in my house
So
before.
75, a little bit probably after the summer, you did get rocks and bricks thrown through your window, right? That definitely happened? Good, because I actually
Yeah,
asked
that
somebody from this area and they had mentioned that they had found out that John Carr was doing it to your house.
That's complete BS. We now know that the whoever told us that story was lying to us, and we now know that the rocks and the bottles were thrown by neighborhood youths. I'm willing to concede that point. I don't think John Carr had anything whatsoever to do with the Neto attacks.
So let's pin this down. When were you in the hospital? Do you remember what year?
No, my daughter, I think he said, when I went to the hospital, you have about 10 years old. Yeah.
All right, so right there, Sylvia just says 10, right? She doesn't wait. She doesn't equivocate. She doesn't stumble, mumble, stammer, stutter. She says 10 right away.
So that would be what year?
87.
74.
That's
So-
when she was in the hospital. She was there, and then we're talking back to 75 when she came back, and
So they're saying she was in the hospital in 74, okay, which coincides with Sylvia later telling me that the letters were coming when the Mets got routed out by the San Diego Padres, and that happened in July of 74. Okay, so it's all coming together where she was in the hospital. They're all saying that the letters started coming when she was in the hospital. Nobody wanted to tell her because she was in the hospital for a nervous condition, and that they couldn't tell her that this was happening, and that when she came back to basically a terror zone. The letters were coming and the calls were coming.
But you're saying that things occurred while she was in the hospital? So it could have been as early as 1974?
I don't know.
Right.
I think everything happened when she got back.
Yes.
Yeah, everything. When
Yes.
I come back.
I think you were hospitalized before this thing happened with
Yeah,
Somerset.
nothing. I remember even that you think I have the way I was. I want to come to a house with problem like that.
Right.
And they had to keep. They had to put me back again.
Okay, so hospital, you get out, you come back in here, that's when things
The problem
start.
75.
So 75. But I am a little confused though, because you said that the letters came when you were in the hospital earlier.
I was in the hospital when my sister and my mother received that letter, and they read it and they see it's a crazy thing what they say,
Okay.
and then we don't know. And she said, "I don't want to say nothing to my husband because we have enough. What we have, we want to give him more worry." They rip him up.
So right there, we're establishing she was in the hospital. That's when things started. She was in the hospital when Sylvia was 10. 74, 75.
Letters and
I feel that the letters was before the fire, before he tried to set the house on fire. The letters.
The letters were before the
And
fire.
I was here because
This
during the
this is probably the best bit of evidence out of all of them right here.
the house on fire. The letters.
The letters were before the
And I
fire.
was here because during the cocktail Molotov, I moved with my mom for 3 months, but then I came back. Right after he tried to set the house on fire.
Okay.
I came back I think 2 months after, he tried to set the house on fire.
So, right, this is important because
So what she said there was very important. She said she wasn't here for the Molotov cocktail and that she came back. But essentially, she had already read these letters by the time the Molotov cocktail came, is what she's trying to say here. She had already been aware of the letters before she left the house. Before she moved out of the house, she had already seen the letters. When she moved out of the house, that's when the Molotov cocktail hit. So it's a little bit more evidence that this all started before the Molotov.
we want to pin this down, this timeline. What happened?
Okay, so here's another little anecdote that supports the letters before Molotov.
So the story with the letter is that my aunt, knowing that my mother was sick, she burned it. She actually burned the letter. And I'm like, why did you burn the letter? Because we could show the cops.
The cop, no, they are afraid to show my husband because he worried so much about me.
Right.
It's a big problem to see me sick like that. And then they don't want to show my husband. And they take somebody crazy, send the paper like that.
Right.
They send the letter like they're going to do that. And they burn. Then another letter come to, they're going to burn from the top to the bottom. That's letter come.
Right.
And everything passed like that. Then one night, he threw a Molotov, how you call it?
Molotov cocktail?
And my daughter sleep that night with my mother.
So notice how here she's saying that the letters came when she was sick, when she was in the hospital. We've already established that the hospital was 74, 75. And then in this recounting right here, she talks about the letters and then she says the fire.
Upstairs,
in the
second floor.
Upstairs.
Okay, now here's some little odds and ends that we're going to deal with. Let's deal with this Eddie thing, shall we? Because remember, in the police reports, Eddie was associated with the Molotov cocktail. Okay. This is very, very important. Eddie was associated with the Molotov cocktail in the police report. Let's hear what Sylvia has to say about that.
Now, the thing in the article, in the newspaper article, it said that you, Maria, heard somebody say outside, Eddie.
My daughter, because she was with my mom.
Now notice how quickly they remembered that, right? Eddie. She just was like, my daughter. But that was my daughter. They remembered Eddie right away. The recall of these people is unbelievable 45 years later. Okay, which to me lends more credence to their story, that they're telling me an accurate story here than what's in the police report. But let's listen to more about Eddie.
Mother, remember?
What was the story with that?
That was here, so it couldn't have been.
Yeah.
You're asking me for something that I'm trying to place.
Right.
I heard it here when I sleep here.
Okay.
Eddie, or get out or something.
Eddie, get out.
Or yeah, but it wasn't the Molotov cocktail because I was upstairs in my grandmother's
When
house.
was that?
Wasn't the Molotov cocktail. So the police in their report has Eddie associated with the Molotov cocktail, but here we have Sylvia saying that wasn't the Molotov cocktail. This Eddie was something else.
It could have been during the rock, when they threw the rock.
Okay.
Is what I'm thinking.
When did you hear somebody call Eddie? When was that? During the fire?
She was
No,
sleeping
Teresa,
with
it
my
was
mother.
before I was
yeah.
over here. Remember when I used to have the bedroom here?
Yeah. At night? You
Some
heard
voices like Eddie, and it was like
somebody calling Eddie.
Eddie, and then you hear the because it was not the Molotov cocktail.
So Eddie was associated with the rocks. Okay. Now there's also the
Who is Eddie?
That's what we don't know. But Sylvia.
All right. So who's Eddie? I love that line. All right. So listen, we're establishing some things here. We're establishing that there's a contradiction between the police report and what the Netos are telling me. You guys have to decide who's telling the truth or not. I can't make that up for you. All I'm saying is that there's these contradictions. I can show you how the Eddie report was wrong. The police had the Eddie as part of the Molotov cocktail. Here you have them saying unequivocally, no, it wasn't part of the Molotov cocktail. Eddie was part of the rocks and bottles. Okay. So we saw that the police report got that wrong. Okay, so the police are fallible. The police make mistakes. All right. But maybe some of you are saying, well, no, the police didn't make any mistakes. 45 years later, these people are not remembering anything, even though their stories are all remarkably consistent. And Mrs. Neto is 86 years old, and her mind isn't there. I mean, listen to the way she's talking. I mean, I'm not saying this. This is what naysayers might be saying to themselves. Well, here's an old elderly lady. Her mind isn't there. How is she going to remember this elderly woman? She's not going to remember a damn thing. Her memory's shot. She's not credible. She can't even speak English and all this kind of stuff. Well, those are valid points. So to that end, I want to show you some footage that I took of her speaking in her native Spanish. Okay. And we're not going to have translation on this. You're just going to have to feel this. My mother is from Puerto Rico. She's a native Spanish speaker. Okay. I had my mother interview Mrs. Neto about these crimes, and it's about an hour-long video. But on one of the questions I had her ask was, what would you say to Berkowitz if you were in a room with him today? And I just want you to see Maria Neto, and this was months after. Okay, what you're about to see now is months after those initial interviews. So she's even older. All right. I want you to see her, and I want you to see how she answers this. And I want you to see if you feel that she's unreliable, if she has a bad brain, if her memory's shot, if she has dementia. I want you to just listen to this and you decide for yourself.
Si usted estuviese hoy día en una sala como estamos aquí ahora, con David Berkowitz.
So she's saying, if you were in a room like we're in today with David Berkowitz, ¿qué le diría? What would you say to him? What to him would you say? ¿Qué le to him diría? Would you say?
¿Qué le diría a David Berkowitz?
Yo le diría,
I would tell him.
porque siempre pensé que era una persona con un trastorno mental, porque era imposible hacer una persona hacer semejante cosa a personas que no le han hecho nada, no tenía por qué sentirse herido con nosotros, ni lo conocía. Pero le diría a él, como ser humano que soy, que se arrepienta, que hay un Dios muy grande y nos perdona a todos, y que yo misma, si va y le habla a su Dios donde él esté, porque él debe ser muy infeliz por hacer todo aquel que hace mal. Nunca lo he visto, ya yo estoy viejita, pero ya he visto muchos casos, nunca he visto a nadie a ser feliz si no te buscas tu dinero con tus propias manos y el conocimiento que Dios te ha dado y creer en ese Dios divino. Nunca he visto a nadie irse feliz de esta tierra, lo que he visto irse. Más aquellos que han hecho su trabajo, si no han podido verlo en él, por las cosas de la vida, lo han visto en sus hijos. Y qué hermoso, si lo más grande que tenemos son los hijos. Qué hermosos. Pensar que nos vamos, pero que dejamos la semilla que Dios sueña en nosotros.
¿Tú lo perdonarías?
Sí lo perdonaría.
Would she forgive him? Yes, I would.
Porque uno nunca sabe lo que una persona siente cuando está enfermo así. Cuando le falla la mente, no, que a mí nunca me falló de yo decir disparate No, señor. Siempre estuve. Solo cuando me dieron la penicilina, que fue una reacción de la penicilina, me quedé ciega. Pero bendito sea, porque cuando me puse ciega, vi lo más hermoso de mi vida, que es a mi Dios de espalda. Y me dijo una cosa muy hermosa. Nunca mucho puede ser que no le interese, que nos amáramos unos a los otros y que me había puesto aquí en esta tierra de ejemplo.
Pero tú en verdad lo perdonarías. Yo no
Sí,
puedo creer que
sí llegaba a perdonarlo, porque tú no sabes lo que había en esa mente. Ese fue un niño, creo que no tenía, si tenía mamá, sería muy pobre.
Fue adoptado.
Ajá. Entonces a un niño criarse en un ambiente de eso, jamás podrá ser como...
She's having compassion for David Berkowitz here. She's saying she feels sorry for him. She's he was adopted and how a person who's adopted is already starting out with a bad lot in life.
Tú, ni como tú, que está la madre aquí al lado, que eso es hermoso, está luchando para su hijo, para todos, pero principalmente para su hijo, porque lo más grande que se quiere es un hijo. Y ese sabe Dios, al no tener ese calor de madre, al no tener ese calor de padre, por eso es muy importante, todos los jóvenes y viejos, más el joven que empieza a tener un hogar, miren bien si están capacitados para hacerlo, porque de esos problemas que se le presentan a los hijos, de ahí salen las tragedias, las mayores tragedias. Esos niños, los que van a la guerra, vienen heridos, no los están mirando. Muchachos sanos que van a la guerra y vienen destruidos. Nos está hablando una persona que tiene un 3er grado. Todos estos doctores que son doctorados, con ser doctor, y sacaron inocente, vivo, con la inteligencia que Dios le dio de poder llegar a ser médico. ¿Cómo vas a coger un inocente que no puede defenderse, que está dentro del vientre de la madre, que la única que lo puede defender es esa madre? Y esos niños, el doctor, que sabe tanto, porque algunas veces esa madre puede ser una niña también abusada de niña y no sabe después lo que va a hacer. El doctor no estudió y sabe lo que va a hacer. Va a matar, va a sacarlo. Doctores, yo le pido, no hagan eso. Ustedes pueden ganar dinero en cualquier parte, porque son médicos. Yo vine aquí con 3er grado y gracias a Dios y a mi familia, por el ayuda de mi familia, que fue mi madre y mi padre y todos ellos que me llevaron hacia adelante. Aquí está María Neto, que quería contar mi historia para que la oigan. Si la quieren poner, la ponen, y si no, la cortan. Pero le estoy hablando de corazón. La niña que no tenía zapatos, la niña que tuvo lepra. Estoy sana aquí hablando con los que están sanos. Tenía un ingreso para entrar al hospital con mi padre y no entré. Pero tenía un padre que era un hombre, que en el suelo se levantaba para darnos comida. Tenía una madre que era ejemplo de una sociedad. Nunca tuvo nada. Bendecía este país, porque llegó a este país y mi madre, este país, la ayudó. Qué hermosa madre eres donde quiera que estás. Te estoy hablando, a ver si esto te lo ponen en público, pero fue verdad. Nunca nos abandonaron. Nunca vi a mi padre con otra mujer. Siempre nos respetaron. Mi papá cayó en un hospital con 33 años. Una vida. Dejaba 6 hijas abandonada. No había welfare en Cuba. Teníamos que enfrentarnos a la soledad, al desprecio de una sociedad. Porque al tener lepra nadie te quería en ninguna parte. Ni la escuela, te sacaban de la escuela. Eso pasamos, esta familia que hizo Demetrio García y Andrea Almeida, que fue un ejemplo. Llegamos, todos tienen casa en este país. Nos quejamos de este país. ¿De qué se quejan? Trabaja y lucha para que veas que llega. Si yo llegué con 3er año, las niñas que juzgaban con lepra, si yo llegué con 3er grado, ¿por qué ustedes no pueden llegar en este país maravilloso que nos da la mano? Nos da la mano con todos los defectos que pueda tener. Bendito y God bless you, América.
Gracias, María.
Gracias, doña María. Yo me emociono tanto.
So she brought my mother to tears. And she says about the end there, of course, God bless America. So hell, eternal damnation and hellfire to anybody who says that this woman's a communist. But I wanted to show you that because in her native tongue, you see the passion, the fire in her, and you see how, well, believable she is. So the Neto story in 2021. Okay. We've just got a few more minutes, guys, and then we are going to end this. So what are some possible explanations for this contradictions? Well, one explanation, and we're going to go through each one dispassionately, okay? Because I'm not against the YPD. I'm not for the YPD in this. I'm just speaking as a journalist dispassionately. What are our options here that we have? Well, we have the first option is the Yonkers did not get the whole story from the Netos and reported it accurately. So what does that mean? It means that the Netos didn't tell them everything they told us. that the Netos only told them that the fire, that the Netos told them a specific story, and then YPD reported it totally accurately, and that what the Netos said was what the YPD reported. That's our first option. Our second option is that the YPD got the whole story and didn't take the report accurately. Okay, that's a possibility. Now, I saw my friend Bob Maitre before. Now, I have a lot of respect for Bob Maitre and what he has to say about Joseph Serlak. Okay, so I'm not going against my man Maitre here, but I want to point out that in the Serlak-Sarasi document, which we have gone over extensively, and we will go over again because it's on videos that have been now removed. So again, the second option is that the Yonkers got the whole story, the story that they told me in 2021, and they didn't take the report accurately. They screwed up the report. Is that possible? Do police make mistakes? Do Serlak and Sarasi make mistakes? Well, here's from Serlak and Sarasi. In February 76, Berkowitz moved to a second floor apartment in a private house at 172 Coligny Street. Now, very minor mistake. It's Avenue, okay? But it's still a mistake. June 1st, 1953, Richard David Falco, born to Betty Falco. 17 months later, David Falco was adopted by Nathan and Pearl. That's a mistake. He was not 17 months old when he was adopted, okay? On January 31st, 1976, Berkowitz's father retired, and he and his stepmother moved to Boynton Beach, Florida. Remember, this is written by the same detectives that took the Neto reports. That date is a year off. That was January 31, 1975. Yes, a minor point, but still showing you that police are fallible. They make errors. Here we go. David Berkowitz, employed by a security guard, employed by IBI security guard, 3578 White Plains Road, Jamaica. That is not in Queens. That's in the Bronx. White Plains Road is not in Jamaica, Queens. Mistake. October 23rd, 76, Carl Denaro, security guard at the beach, is parked on with his girlfriend at 160th between 32nd and 33rd Avenue. That's a mistake. He was parked on 159th. And so I picked out 5 mistakes, some relatively minor, some not so minor. Again, just to point out that police do make errors on their reports. I'm not saying that it happened in Serlak's case, but here I have shown you that a report that has Serlak's name on it is riddled with errors. And I'm not, again, going against Maitre, Bob. In fact, I got to give you a call. I want to do a video with you. This is not to cast aspersions on your friend, who I've heard nothing but great things about, but it is possible that he made some errors. Okay, here's another possibility. YPD got the whole story and reported it accurately, and that the Netos in 2021 were wrong. Everything that the Netos told me was wrong, and the YPD was correct. That's a possibility. Or that the Netos were right in 2021, but that the attacks before Berkowitz moved to Yonkers were unrelated to Son of Sam. That's another possibility. In other words, the rocks and the letters and the calls were not Son of Sam related whatsoever. They were coming from other people other than Berkowitz. I don't think that that's the case, because the letters talked about demons in the attic and the dogs of hell and this type of stuff, all signatures of Berkowitz. But that is our possibility. Now, what's another possibility? That's it for our possibilities. These are the 4 possible explanations for the discrepancy. The Netos didn't tell the cops the story correctly in 77. The Netos did tell the story correctly, and the cops made an error. The YPD got the whole story, reported it accurately, and that the Netos completely told me a different story in 2021 that they just made up off the top of their heads. That's a possibility. Or that the Netos were right in 2021 and that the attacks before Berkowitz moved to Yonkers were not related to Son of Sam. Those are the only 4 possibilities to explain the contradictions. And if there's any more, please put them in the comments, because again, I want to suss this out. Now, ramifications. What does this mean for me as a researcher? What does this mean for my credibility and my integrity? Well, If the Netos were wrong and the attack started when Berkowitz moved to Yonkers, well, it does nothing to hurt the credibility of my theory of the no cult thesis. Okay. It does destroy my other thesis of him starting the attacks before he moved to town. But it doesn't do anything to hurt the credibility of my no cult thesis, because in this scenario with Berkowitz doing all these attacks after 76, he could be doing it completely alone. Okay. So in other words, there's no ramifications whatsoever in this first scenario. Ironically, and this is where the people who are still the few dwindling remaining Maury Terry fans, you should actually want my original thesis to be correct, because it's the only one that holds the possibility out for other accomplices in Son of Sam. If someone else started the attacks before Berkowitz moved to town, that means he was working with somebody on Neto. I don't believe that anymore. Okay. I think that, and by the way, if anybody wants to call in, feel free. I've gone, this is a very long show. I told you it would be. We're not quite done, and I definitely want to get some calls. So please call in. Okay. In either scenario, though, in either scenario of these ramifications, we still have the thorny issue of the getaway driver for Rocket. Okay. And I've just named him as potentially Richie Sperrazza. And I just said that he might not have had anything to do with Son of Sam. But I'm calling out Richie Sperrazza as a possible getaway driver. And a getaway driver in Neto does not equate to involvement in Son of Sam. This is very important to understand. So Eric and Jack are in the queue. You guys get your audio ready, please. I'm going to stop the share. And I just want to basically, screw it. We've gone 2 hours. Let's get some people in here. I kind of want to get both in. Let's get you all both in together. Hey. Let's start. Hey guys, I just facilitate discussion. Let's get the
great. I'm on, right, Manny?
Yeah, but let's start with let's start with Jack first, though, and then we'll get Eric. Only because Eric, you're on all the time. You got
to. Okay. Well, I'm starting to be on all the time as well. But
it's all right. You're on a little less than Eric.
First, a quick statement. Anybody who doubts the Netos or doubts their loyalty to this country, I can't help them. I mean, this is a wonderful family. If they made any mistakes in their testimony and in their interview with you, Manny, I think it's simply because it's been so long. They might have had a minor detail. But as you said, their recall of these incidents is very, very good. And I trust them implicitly. Just a wonderful family. Maria Neto is obviously the matriarch of the family. And she reminds me so much of my own mother. If my mother had not been Irish Catholic and had been born in Cuba, she would have been Maria Neto or Maria Neto's sister. So I have a special place in my heart for Maria because I can't help thinking about my own mother. So in the spirit of July 4th, anybody who doubts this family and their loyalty to this country, as I said, I can't.
Well, it's starting to go around the Son of Sam world.
Yeah,
and some certain people are picking that up and going with it. And they're just killing themselves. I mean, they're killing their own credibility. I mean, but anyway, let's not worry about that.
Few things. I think the testimony shows the preponderance of evidence shows that these events started before Berkowitz moved to 35 Pine Street.
I believe that too.
Seems to be that's what happened. Number two, I think the testimony, especially from Jackie, who seems very positive, in the shooting of Rocket, there definitely was an accomplice.
I agree 100%.
So
there was definitely an accomplice.
Two together, my outlook on this is that this did not start with Berkowitz. Somebody else had a grudge against the Netos, and Berkowitz was brought in later to sort of escalate the situation because he was willing to do that.
Okay.
And number three, that goes to this point, the letter writers and the calls that the Netos received. The person who was doing that had to have more knowledge of this family than David Berkowitz could have possibly had. He had just moved to 35 Pine Street. He lived on the 7th floor. He's new to the neighborhood. I think he's only been in Yonkers at another place for a month or two. So I don't see how he can call the house and ask for Sylvia by name. Ask, no, he knows Andrea's name.
Well,
He
Andrea
knows-
he could have found in the phone book. And don't forget, this guy was an expert in phone book research. Just go
Okay,
read the
but
psychiatrist
Sylvia
letters.
at 12 or 13 is not in the phone book.
That I agree with. That is a good point.
And the other one, Teresa, who is Diane, she's not in the phone book. They're getting
Right.
calls. All right. Maria is getting letters sent to her. Back in the 70s, usually phone listings were under the husband's name. It would have been Joaquin Neto. Okay.
Right.
The letters also mention his nickname, Jack the Joker.
No. Let's get that clear. The Jack the Joker is referring to Joaquin Goncarlo.
It could be Joaquin Goncarlo
or Jack Cassara even.
Right, but I think Joaquin Neto's nickname was Jack. Also, didn't he go by Jack?
He did, yes.
Yes.
I'm not sure
Okay.
who he was referring to, but I've always been under the impression that he was not talking about Joaquin Neto.
I fail to see how David Berkowitz could have gotten the names of the aunt, the mother, the cousins, Sylvia, all correct.
That's
He
good
has to
points.
he has to have some inside knowledge, and this person, Joaquin Giancarlo, lives there. Okay,
Right.
so he would be the person that has the knowledge. Now, Maury Terry was looking at him very closely, and
The
that
guy didn't speak a lick of English.
I don't know. Maury was certainly looking at him. In the
Yeah, but
letters,
Sylvia knows him very well, and he still exists to this day. The guy doesn't know one lick of English
Okay.
to this day. He's
I
not
don't
an
know if
English
there will
speaker.
be time, but you could always certainly play those 45 seconds that Joaquin Giancarlo was talked about on the
I know.
88 tape. Okay.
Maury also says he's the owner of the yellow Volkswagen. That's like the fifth owner
No,
of the
I think
yellow
in
Volkswagen.
ADA, the assistant ADA, Herb Leifer, asks Maury, does he have a yellow Volkswagen? And Maury says, no, that's not what he's a guy you need to watch for.
Oh, I heard something completely different. I
Yeah.
got to go back and listen
Yeah,
because I
listen
heard
to that
Maury said,
again.
"Hey, he has the yellow Volkswagen." All right, I'm going to listen to that again.
Okay.
But listen, we're getting past
Okay.
2 hours here. Jack,
All right.
excellent points.
One more thing, and I'm out of here.
Okay.
I believe in the letters to the Neto family, he was called Mr. Blood, Captain Blood.
That was John Carlo. That was Joaquin Gonzalo.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
In the Son of Sam letters, the Breslin letter, I believe he is Wicked King Wicker. Whether he's actually
be.
involved or this is,
Right,
this is
the
Berkowitz's
delusion.
imagination, I believe he is Wicked King Wicker.
It could be, and it could also be the dog because there was a German Shepherd named King that lived in 22.
But on a future episode, I'll tell you who I think the Duke of Death is.
All right, Jack. Well, listen, we'll leave
All
it
right.
there. Once again,
Thanks.
great
Thanks,
call.
Eric.
I always appreciate it. I don't agree with everything you say, but hey, it's always good food for thought. And I actually thought you made some excellent points.
Yeah,
today,
yeah.
Jack.
I don't see how Berkowitz knows that family that intimately. I'm sorry.
I have an idea how he could.
Okay, let's keep you
Okay.
on. Yeah, Eric,
Good.
go ahead.
A quick question. Did you say that he discovered the Neto family from a telephone directory? He chose.
Well, that's my thought. But then again, Jack, is bringing up throwing some good monkey wrenches in there.
What about the Carr family? From a telephone directory also?
I think he
Okay.
found the.
This is a quick question before I get to the timeline. What are the chances of choosing people from a telephone directory and at the same time there being 2 German Shepherds shot?
They're in the backyards barking, front yard barking.
Well, these were two. Remember, he hated both of these dogs. He hated Rocket and Harvey.
He happens
Both.
to choose them from phone books. These people.
No. Well, all right. So I think I see what you're saying. So in other words, there's a real coincidence that they happen to have these dogs. So maybe it was the dogs first that attracted him.
No, this is
Okay.
my point now.
Okay.
The Netos have established 1974 as when something begins to happen.
Late 74, early 75.
Letters
and calls, but
Okay.
letters first.
All right, follow me. I'll be quick. David Berkowitz is demobilized in 1974.
June,
Where did
yes.
he first go to live?
June?
Did he necessarily go to live in the Bronx?
He went back with his parents.
Do we know that for a fact?
I believe so. He went back to Co-op City for a while with his parents, didn't
Right, but Jack, we've just discovered that he had relatives living in Yonkers.
Well, all right, we're gonna let that cat out of the bag because this was actually I wanted this to be a surprise,
sorry,
but we've just found out, and I don't know how close Berkowitz was with these people, but he had a cousin that lived on Roberts Avenue, which is within walking distance to Pine Street, and that he had another cousin who lived on Hall's Terrace, which is coincidentally enough, Jack, you might actually get a kick out of this. Is literally a block north of Pines, two or three blocks north of Pine Street, Glenwood Avenue, really, and also happens to be right there, smack dab in the middle of Maury's Nests. That's where his sister, Susan, lives. Susan Wishengrad Sugar. So not his sister, his cousin. So he has two family members that live within, well, walking distance of Pine Street. So I think that that's definitely a possibility.
The possibility is this, that even if he first lived to live in the Bronx, or maybe did he go to live with them for a while before he first lived in the Bronx and permanently in Yonkers until he was arrested.
Or on his way to visit them, he found that area.
Because
supposedly he went home to the Bronx, lived in Co-op City, and then his father, who had remarried, moved to Florida.
Right, but an obsession. He had an obsession. Obsessions don't just begin like that. There has to be an observance. There has to be something that makes someone eventually focus.
It could be Eric. It could be the dogs, and it could be that the police timeline was right. He moved to Pine Street. He didn't know them at all, and then the dogs started bothering him, and then he became obsessed, and he tried to find out who they were.
Pine Street in 76. I'm talking about maybe he knew of them already in 74.
I think he did.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a stretch, folks.
Wait. When he was demobilized, is there enough of a timeline? Was he demobilized in early 74 to give him time traveling there?
Right. What we need to do is, this is a whole new avenue of research. So guys, I'm telling you, everything you seek is in these psychiatrist letters. He talks all about his cousin Susan Sugar on Hall's Terrace. He names her. He names his cousin Robert on, ironically enough, on Roberts Avenue. This is something that we never knew. Everybody was like, well, how did this kid from the Bronx know of this area in the Northwest Yonkers? Well, he had two family members living there. And it sounded like he was close with at least one of them. So, and they were all his biological mother's relatives, not his adoptive mother's relatives. So this is all there for you guys to read.
Just because you're talking about, I think everyone would agree, is a sociopath, and he has lied in the past.
Yes.
He's told several different stories. And these talks with the psychiatrist, he was in a position when he talked to those psychiatrists where he was trying to convince them that he was completely insane and believed this whole nonsense about the talking dog. So he's trying to fool.
No, quite the opposite. His letters start by saying that the talking dog was all a hoax, that it was all a complete Sam Carr and the Demons. Yes, it was all a hoax, a silly hoax, well planned and thought out. I just never thought this demon story would carry out so much.
Just be careful, because when I asked you the other night how you knew that David Berkowitz said that, or had shot the Netos dog, you said because he said so. David Berkowitz has also told us he's in the process.
He's in the process. Yeah, listen, Jack, I can't deny that what you say makes sense. I mean, that's what makes all this fun, my friend.
I just find
it's fun, but it's real stuff. I would like to get an answer for this family.
I would too. I agree. Yeah. I mean, the only person who could give it is rotting in a prison right now, still trolling people like Carl with process stuff. So anyway, Jack,
he's still a sociopath, and I don't know what to believe when he says something. So,
I think we can agree 100% on. All right, Jack, I'm going to take you off, my friend.
Great. Thanks,
Take
Eric.
care. See you next show.
All right.
I didn't mean to let the cat out of the bag. I didn't do that intentionally.
That's okay, Eric. It's all right. Eric, so you're still on. Any last words?
Yeah, I'm just saying, if he chose the cars and the Netos out of a phone book, what are the chances of them each having dogs and each dog being shot? Harvey survives, Rocket is killed.
He said that in the letters, he says, Eric, and you and I are going to be dealing with this on Psychology Sundays. He says that those dogs were he actually singled out Rocket as being particularly noisy, and we have a testimony from the family saying that he called them up saying to quiet the dog down.
Right, but he has to know them. It's not that he just goes to a phone book and says, I'm going to these people at Wicker Street. He has to know them first.
I think that he's very adept, in my opinion, at finding people through official records. There, if you guys look at his psychiatrist notes about how he found his biological mother, it's a very detailed, page-long, numerated list about how he cross-referenced this phone book with that phone book, and then went to that record and then that record. This was a very intelligent guy about he found his biological mother. I don't think it's a big stretch to find out the names of the people in 18 Wicker.
No, not the names of the people in 18 Wicker, but why did he choose them? And they both happen to have dogs that are shot.
Because he was obsessed with their barking dogs. The dogs were bothering him.
So therefore, he knew them before, and the phone book, finding them in the phone book, just choosing them from a phone book. It's not just choosing them. He had pre-knowledge of
Oh,
that.
I see what you're saying. So in other words, the choosing of the phone book, like why? Well, again, that's just my theory. I don't have any proof or anything. And in fact, it may be that the Netos were wrong and that they told the police the right story and everything started on May 13th.
Oh, I think they're 100% correct.
I think it goes back to 74 personally.
I agree.
But let me tell you, Eric, even if the Netos were wrong, if the Netos were wrong and everything started on May 13th, 1976, my life just became a ton easier because then I no longer have to worry about the pre-76 attacks. I can just say Berkowitz moved to town, started the attacks, he worked alone, and then there you go. No cult.
But we do have to be concerned with them because they're there.
I agree. So anyway, it's a mystery. Listen, Eric, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I've reached my limit, my friend.
What I meant about the coincidence of
I do get it. I do get it completely.
Shot. He didn't know it beforehand.
I agree. It's a mystery. So listen, Eric, you and I are going to be 11 a.m. on Sundays, the first Psychology Sunday. We're going to be dealing with only 3 letters, and that show will probably take another 2 hours. So we're rocking and rolling.
Not because I'm your friend. You were excellent. You really edited and handled this beautifully.
Thank you, Eric. I truly, truly appreciate that, my friend.
And even though most people don't understand Spanish, you gave them the emotional buildup to have conveyed to them what she was saying, even though they didn't understand.
Well, the point was just to show that her mind is there. She has her mind. This isn't a senile old lady.
Yeah. Well, I got to go outside now and ask water, but I'm not bringing a rifle. I'm bringing a.
All right, Eric. We'll see you soon. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll plan out our show. All right, bud.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks. All right, guys. Well, listen. What a night. This is my longest show. We have 120 people still sticking in there watching. So we are just killing it. So let me tell you something, guys. I am totally cool with my theory being blown to smithereens. I love it, in fact, because again, my life becomes much easier if Berkowitz does all of these once he moves to town. It's only if these incidents started before, like what the Netos told me, that we have this whole other avenue of research to think of. Either way, we still have the getaway driver and Neto. And the getaway driver in Neto, of course, does not equate to an accomplice in Son of Sam. We need to start thinking about these things again, holistically, separately, I should say, not holistically, separately. All right. Well, listen, great episode. I want to say thank you so much. I would love to take more calls, but I am done. 2 hours and 20 minutes is my limit. So listen, guys, I was really looking forward to this one. I have been wanting to reintroduce the Neto story to 2022, and I think this was the perfect opportunity to do it. I found something in these files that was a contradiction, and rather than shirk it and try to, pretend like it didn't exist, just face it head on. That's what we have to do. Because remember, always, one of my favorite sayings, until you face the battle, the war is your home. All right, guys, we'll see you next show. Thank you.